Welcome to Diary of an Ex-Ho. I'm Cheri Hardman. I'm your ex-ho. Today's guest is Cavin Eggleston. So relax, enjoy the podcast, and remember the old saying, always a bridesmaid when you're a hoe. How are things going for you right now?
Things are going great. It's been good. Just back from being on the road and turning around and having to leave again in another week. So it's been fun, been busy.
For World Series or
Yeah,
other
these ones
stuff
are
or
going off
both?
to do hosting for World Series.
hmm Now, where do you live now? I don't know why I can't remember.
I live in Indianapolis. It's because every time I get brought up to stage, I change the city.
Is that because you keep moving, or are you just making up random cities that you're from?
Pretty much. I like to keep people guessing.
Yeah, well, then nobody can follow you home, right?
Yep.
Well, we're here today to talk about sex. Um, the primary reason that I wanted to talk to you was about there's a particular room that you do that I wanted to kind of discuss, but I also want to just like go through like your sexual history a little bit.
All right.
So I'm going to ask you some questions about the past, and then we'll jump to now. But so are your parents married?
Yeah, they're still married.
Still married? All right. Now, were they like affectionate with each other when you were growing up,
I mean, like in the way where they'd say things that they shouldn't out loud.
or just where they would, kiss and cuddle and touch and
Yeah, they
or
weren't like they would if they were sitting on the couch next to each other, they'd touch, but not like they weren't a PDA kind of family.
yeah, okay. And then were they affectionate with you guys? Or do you have siblings?
Yeah, I have a sister who's 12 years older than me. So
Oh,
I think that probably answers the question about how like active my parents were. If you have that big of a gap between kids. Like actually that's the thing. The first time my mom met my now wife, she was like my wife's birthday is Valentine's Day. And my mom's like, "Oh my God, that's the day we conceived Cavin."
and you're like, ew.
Yeah, I was like, I didn't know that. Also, why I've been dating this girl for 2 weeks. Now I have to marry her. Like, why would you do this? I can't have that be a secret outside the family. Um, yeah, I was like, and she's like, well, everyone should know that. And I was like, you shouldn't know the exact day. You should be having so much sex. It should just be, it could be a range, but like you shouldn't be able to pin down Valentine's Day 1985, you know?
Uh, so I bet your sister and you probably had totally different lives. I know my sister is 8 years younger than I am, and by the time she, was growing up and stuff, I was already out of the house.
Yeah. My sister, so my parents had my sister when they were like 17, 18.
Mm-hmm.
So like completely different lives for
Right.
her growing up versus me.
Yeah. Well, you probably had it a lot easier than she did, though.
In some ways, in some like there was definitely more money because it wasn't, two broke college kids or two broke high school kids. But like other ways, like my parents got very strict on weird things. Like my
Oh,
parents,
really?
I think I've talked about it. Yeah, my parents were like bad, like fundamental Christians. Like they would just kind of guess what the Bible said, and then like we'd go to church, and they'd like really want to go to church, and then they wouldn't because they realized it interfered with football.
Yeah.
So yeah,
So they were winging it.
yeah. So it's like the Beatles were bad, but here's a healing crystal.
That's funny. Okay, so do you? Okay, so I want you to tell me about. Everybody takes this term differently about your sexual awakening, like when you first realized that something was going on that you previously didn't know was going on. So do you
Yeah.
remember a moment or?
Man, I think it was there's like a couple that I can really remember. I can remember one. I was like 6 or 7, and we were watching the news, and they were talking about a bust of strip clubs in Seattle, and they had the ladies, like they showed the ladies dancing on the stage. And I was like, why would anybody ruin that? Why would you? Why is that
Right.
a bad thing? And so I was like, that was the first time I was like, oh, I like boobies. And then I think it probably like 11 or 12 is when you're like, oh, hey, this thing reacts to just about anything. That's pretty cool. Um, and then like I had one a few years ago, and I was like, oh, yeah, I don't actually like sexual attraction is a spectrum. You don't have to be just straight. So I was like, oh, that's cool. So I was like at 30. So
Oh,
yeah, seeing old Henry Cavill doing those arm shotgun things in the Mission Impossible movie, I was like, wow, that does things. You're just maybe a bicep sexual.
huh. Well, learning things about you I didn't know before.
Yeah.
Um, Speaking of which, like, how long have you been doing comedy?
5 years.
Wow, that's not very long.
No, no, it's not.
So you're doing really great for 5 years, but you had some amazing opportunities.
Yeah.
Really
I've
have.
gotten really lucky, been in the right spot at the right time, and had just people that were really supportive. So I've been getting, like I said, I've just gotten immensely lucky.
Yeah, that's great. I didn't mean like I didn't mean it like oh you just got lucky. Like no, I mean you.
No, no,
Oh,
no.
okay.
I mean, I just happened to be at the right time in my life where I could be like, oh, this is a thing I can focus on. Um,
Yeah.
'Cause like, have you seen a lot of younger comics that I'm like, oh, you might be incredibly funny, but like your life is going to change in 3 years, and you're going to have kid, family, marriage. You got to have a job, and I'm like, you can, you probably, and you've seen really talented people that can't do that. I
Right.
got lucky
Yeah.
because I have a wife that's really supportive with comedy. I had a job that I could at least plan some comedy around. Yeah. So, and then I just had, like I said, coming up in the Seattle Tacoma scene at the right time. I feel like
Mm-hmm. That's great. I'm getting ready to retire at the end of the school year, so I'm gonna have a lot more time for comedy.
hell yeah.
So I'm really excited about that. Okay, back to the dirty talk. Let's see. Do you remember like a movie, like a mainstream movie that you were watching that had a scene in it that like you still remember as being erotic? Like,
Dude, I remember burning out a copy of Predator 2 because that
really?
was the first time I ever saw full frontal nudity. It was Predator 2 on
Uh,
VHS. And it was just like that early 90s, like full bush. You're like,
uh,
you don't know. They could have been just wearing pants and it's the same amount of skin
mhm.
you see, but there's something about you're like, you're not supposed to see that.
Now, I know that makes me curious. Like, are you still attracted to full bush?
No. Well, I mean, like, I don't care. I treat sex the same way I treat like a gift giving holiday. Like I'm gonna write you a thank you note regardless. I'm just happy to be here. I feel like I'm always like a little bit of like a stepdad that like got invited to the family reunion and was like, hey, thanks. This is an honor. It really making
I
me feel
was a
like I
little,
belong here.
I was a little confused about the stepdad reference there, but I got it.
It
Okay.
checks out. Well, we have modern porn where you're like every step sibling is a thing in that now.
What is your favorite porn category?
Uh,
Like
you
your
know,
go-to
I
that you're
have
willing to admit?
ADHD really bad, so like you got to go compilation, which I know is just like
Oh,
I'm like yeah, you just I'm like I got to have a sick beat and flashing lights. If it's sex that looks like it happened in a rave, I'm there.
um, okay. So, what is your definition of amazing sex?
Gosh, I guess it's that kind where like you get that leg twitch during it. Like that's where I'm like, oh, that's nice. Nobody cramps up. I think I have old people sex now that I think about it. Now that I say it out loud, what my standards are is like, oh, if my back doesn't go out, yeah, I think like that's it. Is just like, or that when you are done and your partner walks weird to the bathroom. I think that's where you're like, I did good. I did good work there.
Oh, that's good. All right, so what are you telling me about? So you produce a comedy show in a sex club? Is that what we call it?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
why don't you
It's
tell
not
me about
technically a
how you?
swingers club.
Okay,
Yeah, it's a lifestyle club, I guess is the word that they like to use.
okay.
Um, yeah, so this one was like I was looking for venues when I got to Indianapolis, and I typed in like live music because I was like, if they have live music, they probably have a stage. Is a good place to start. And I found this place, and it was weird because it was listed as a travel agency. And I was like, why the
Hmm.
frick would a travel agency have a stage? So, anyways, I called up the guy. We talked. He's like, yeah, come check it out. I get there. It is from the outside, it's an old church.
Now wait a minute. Did he tell you what it was before you went
No,
there?
no.
Okay.
He's like, do you know our story? And I was like, no. And he's like, okay, well, I'll tell you when you get here. And I was like, what the fuck is that? And I like text Bree, and I was like, hey, honey, I'm gonna lose a kidney in this one probably. And I go there. It's an old church, and this like kind of hippie-ish guy lets me in, and we just start talking. And he's like, first off, this ain't a fuck club. Uh, he's like, there's nothing that's happening in here that's not happening in hotel rooms across America. And I was like, the fuck am I in? And I found out, so it was a church, then it was a funeral home, and now it's a sex club. And
Natural progression, right?
yeah, yeah, it's like the Denny's to like a Rob Roy to like a Party City. It's just that natural progression of sadness. Um, but so I go there and they have this stage, and I was like, oh, this is great. They have a stage, and I'm like looking, and there's the horse that they tie people to, and a
Okay.
St. Andrew's cross, which I didn't know what it was at the time. And I was like, well, shit, I like a stage, and all the lighting was perfect for a show. And I was like, oh, that's really
Hey,
great.
wait,
He goes, oh,
wait,
yeah, you
wait.
know why the lighting's great? Is because when they had the funerals, that was where they put the casket.
Okay, wait. What is a St. Andrew's cross?
St. Andrew's cross is that X that you can tie people to for bondage.
Okay. All right. I
So
just want to
basically, I
clarify.
do this show now where their bondage room is. And it's a bi-monthly show. And they are the wildest audiences I've worked with. I'll give them shit as a crowd because they're a great audience. They're not necessarily the best comedy audience. Like they love to talk back at you. They almost delight in seeing what they can do to make you like mess up your set. Yeah, but they'll do it very playfully. Like, they'll flash you or something, or they'll throw jello shots at you or things like that. Like they're just a
Mhm.
very fun group. But what I learned is like that show, these are folks that just came for a good time.
Right.
And that was actually kind of the weirdest thing to me is like finding out there's a segment because I had thought swingers, I had this conception of key parties, upside down pineapples everywhere, and then just like kind of
And you know
this
what?
weird
Now, what
atmosphere.
upside down pineapples? I don't know that. So,
Oh, so an upside down pineapple is a symbol of you're a swinger.
okay.
So that's why if you go somewhere and you see somebody wearing an upside down pineapple, they might be a swinger.
Okay.
Same with flamingos in the yard.
Now, I'd heard that, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of old people that have flamingos in their yard. So,
Yeah, well, you asked the question.
okay.
But yeah, so they do that. So they have like a swinging room, and then they have the bondage room, which is where we do the show, and we get 80, 90, 100 people in at this show. Um, and we've had it weird. I mean, just some of the wildest stuff. Like we were doing the show one night, and I just remember this guy come the first time it happened. The first time they messed with our show, this lady comes out just buck ass naked
Mm-hmm.
because she had just been enjoying a gangbang.
Okay.
And she was like, well, I heard laughter and I want to go see what that's about. Why is everyone paying attention to this? And she messed up one of the comedians so bad he forgot his name.
Oh,
He, do you know, have you ever met Learn More, Jonassi?
mm-mm.
Yeah, so he's a very funny comedian. He came here from Zimbabwe by going by the name Long John. He then transitioned to being Learn More, which is his actual name.
Mhm.
And the minute she came out naked, he goes back to being Long John. And it was the funniest thing because I was like, dude, come on, act like you've been here before. But we had one where there was an orgy and we're telling jokes, and I just see a guy run out full Donald Duck, just covering his penis, just to like laugh at us and give us a thumbs up, and then run back into the room. They are it was so funny because it's such a horny environment for them, but when you're a comedian on stage, you're like, there, I don't care what you guys are doing.
Right.
uh
Okay. So I want to just ask a couple like logistic
yeah,
things. Like, so is this like a club that you have to like have a membership to?
yeah. So
So
it's a
anybody that's
private membership
there,
club.
so
Huh?
anybody that's there has a membership, like the
Yeah.
general public doesn't come to the show.
So we can this is always what the interesting one. So it's a membership only club. It's a BYOB club, which is
Okay.
also a little bit tricky because you can't cut someone off when they brought it themselves. Um, but as a private membership club, I could, as a member, um, bring in guests and they pay their fee and they can come in as a guest that night. So I could, in theory, have general public come into the show. But we also ran into some huge advertising hurdles because like Facebook pages would take us down for
Oh,
advertising. Um, Sometimes the audience themselves would be a little like I couldn't get press there for the show to check it out because obviously nobody wants their picture taken or nobody wants to go on record being interviewed there because it's still very much like a secret thing. Um, it was tough. Like we looked at doing drink sales as a way to also help supplement the
right.
income. Anything that's going to cause liquor board or cops to show up, the club's a little bit like, hey, that makes our membership nervous.
Right.
Even if they're not doing anything illegal,
Right.
there is still there is a general stigma around. And that's also one of the other things is one is like just how diverse that group is really through my mind. Because again, I had this picture in my head of the average swinger is a 55-year-old dude that's trying to save a marriage. And like you get people in all age ranges, all body sizes. They're almost body positive, I think, to a fault. Because I took off my shirt there one time and they really loved it. And I was like, you guys shouldn't. Should like this is not a good body. And they keep asking me to get comedians naked on stage. And I was like, hey guys, if comedians had big penises, they wouldn't be telling jokes. All right.
So have
So
comedians gotten naked on stage?
I've had a couple that have stripped during their sets. I've had a couple moon the audience because we had a comedian with a tattoo on his butt. I've had comedians down, I think, down to their underwear, but I've
Mm.
not had a comedian get naked on stage yet. And they've even been like, hey, we'll pay you guys more to do that. And I'm like, I'm not comfortable messaging a comic being like, hey, I'll pay you $50 for doing this show for 10 minutes, or I'll pay you 150 if you get naked. And that just feels creepy as somebody with this face
Right. Right.
messaging that. Like you could get away with that message. And they'd be like, oh,
Right.
that's Cheri. She does that for every show. It's weird.
Yeah. Right.
But yeah, like
Um,
I can't be the guy sending that one out.
yeah, that makes sense. Where do you get your budget from? Do they just pay you a fee or how do you do that?
We get a cut of every body that walks in the door. So the way a lot of clubs, lifestyle clubs work, at least in my understanding, is there's a rate for single men. That's always the highest rate.
Right.
Then couples are the next highest rate, and then single women are either cheap or free.
Mm-hmm.
And like so in some ways you're like it's very progressive, and then you find out their logic for it, and you're like, oh, I don't love that. But it's basically like there's such a rarity or scarcity of single women that'll go to those places. They want to incentivize it, and they also want to cut down on the amount of single men that are there.
Right.
So, because it also this club is surprising to me how safe I've felt more safe. My wife goes to these shows, feels more safe going to these shows by herself and producing them when I'm not in town than
Mm-hmm.
she would producing like another show that I do in a different, like in a bar or a restaurant.
Right. So how has tell me how this show has affected your sex life with your wife?
Uh, I think the biggest thing we realized is we're like, hey, we're not as horny as we thought we were as people. Because like these are people that like 24/7 are like, what can we see naked or what can we have sex with? My wife and I are just like, I like you the appropriate amount. Like I want to see you naked the right amount of time.
Yeah.
Because like I started playing Dungeons and Dragons with some of the folks from the clubhouse, and they're like, "Well, how do we make it sexy?" And I was like, "Fuck it, it's dice and nerd shit. We can't make it that sexy." We've been trying for years. We put Chris Pine in a movie about it, and we couldn't make it sexy. Um, so it was like we just realized that. The other thing is, if you go, have you ever been to a swingers club or a sex club?
Um, I went to see a strip show that was at a swingers club, but I didn't see anything going on or whatever.
Yeah,
So
so it's also like you're kind of like, oh, uh, it's weird when you see somebody that could be your next door neighbor naked, and you're just like, oh, that's cool. It just no longer affects me. Um, like having just random nudity or like the weirdest one was a guy getting a blowjob and then like his girlfriend popping up and giving us the thumbs up for like good job. And I was like, that should be a weird point in my life. Like that should be a moment that I have to stop and reevaluate. And now I'm just like, no, we're good.
it's
I got to roll through
um,
this tight five.
do you find yourself uh being aroused when you're there, or is it more just business?
So like I try to treat it as business. I
Yeah.
look at it as my job when I'm there is to provide them some form of entertainment because they're there for an entertaining evening. Um, and that's the biggest hurdle that I've had is like getting comedians to wrap their heads around it. It's basically a naked corporate event for them. It's
Mm-hmm.
I'm like I don't like the idea of paying you money and then you think you're going to hook up with audience members there because then that you've just made me kind of like this weird pimp in this
Right.
situation. Like I'm not bringing you up there to be a meat market for them. And you're also like you fuck with the other comedians later on that think they go there and the audience already has that opinion about them. And then like two, it's like you know I get it. It's a sexually charged thing, but we've had instances where like comics have misread or like audience interaction as invites, both positively and negatively. We've had instances where comics have kind of like not understood the rules. Um, and we're comics. We're naturally kind of curious people. Like we all crave some level of novelty. I mean, are you like that? You're just like, I like new things. I like new
Mm-hmm.
stimulations.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like if you tell me there's a basement where there's a bunch of people having sex, like I'm gonna go look at that. If
Mm-hmm.
for no other reason than I'm like, well, maybe it's a bit, you know. And so you find out the curtain's closed, you can't see behind it, but you can hear stuff. You're like, I'm gonna want to look behind that curtain. Well, in their lifestyle, that's a no-no. That's a huge no-no. Like that's a get you banned thing. So I'm like, I've had to have that conversation with comics. And then like secondly, or the other thing is just like your material. There's some comedians that think like really political material is going to kill there. No, those people, the last thing on their mind is politics.
Mm-hmm.
Or people have been like, the other thing is they think their like blue material might kill. No, like these people invented certain sex acts. Like you're not going to shock them with, you're like, hey, here's my wiener joke. They
Yeah.
don't care.
Uh-huh.
So,
Yeah.
or the
Yeah.
other,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
we've done crowd work, and crowd work will work if you ask them about their sex life. Won't work if you ask them about their personal life. Like asking them who has kids. Nobody goes to a sex club being like, well, I hope somebody brings up the 9-year-old I left at home.
Right. Yeah, I'm getting ready to do I don't know what to call it. I'll call it a sex club for lack of knowing what to
Hell
call
yeah.
it. And so I just, do you have any pointers for me?
Have fun. So what I tell every comedian when they do this show is I want you to have fun. I don't want you to ever get worried about being married to your set because something is going to happen. Those rooms are so everyone there is there for something to happen. And some of the people you'll get in that room, like ours is a bondage room. We have a large, or they have a decent population that are exhibitionists.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'll end up having sometimes is like my front half of my showroom is exhibitionists that want to be seen, and they maybe aren't fully aware that's what they're doing, but they want to be seen and interacted with. And the back half of my room is actually like voyeurs or sometimes cuckold couples, things like that. And they don't want to be seen. And they're just kind of
Mm-hmm.
lurking. And it's a very fascinating dynamic. It's I tell comics to be very fluid with how they're doing with their set. If you feel something you want to go off on, the other thing I tell them is never, you can't, this is the one audience you can't be mean to. Like you shouldn't be shitty to audiences in the first place, but you know what it like when you've done a Sunday or a Friday late show and they're all tired and you're kind of like, what the fuck are we doing here? You never
Mm-hmm.
want to do that to them because you're ruining their night. And it's not just like as soon as we leave the comedy show, I can go do something else. It's like you've ruined their whole night potentially the whole way. But I also tell comics never make fun of their lifestyle. You can talk about it. No one they'll share with you. But it's also the only room I've ever had where people have like fact checked comics during their show.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because I do a joke about pony play, and it's the joke just exists to get to a horse sound, just to say neigh.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had a lady be like, "No, I'm sorry, that's not what pony play is," and
Oh,
just like would not let it go. And I was like, "Okay, I don't know what to do here, lady."
yeah.
I wrote this, did not anticipate having a pony play enthusiast vocally in the audience. So, but yeah, that show more than anything has informed how I host and how interactive I get. It was a crash course on surviving crowd work. And because I never was a crowd work person. I usually like
Right.
material. I like stories. It taught me how to do crowd work and just really pivot and think on my feet with people.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I transition back to normal clubs, I sometimes have to like, ooh, dial it back.
Right.
But yeah, also I found it like made my joke writing. I was trying to be clean, and then I started doing the show, and all of a sudden my joke writing got dirtier, but it also got a little
Yeah.
bit more authentic.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been good. They were the first audience I ever told jokes about being panned to.
Mm.
And being like, oh, this is I can talk about this part of my life that I never really talked about on stage before, and so that was kind of a new experience for me.
Uh-huh.
Um, so those have been the fun ones for me with them. Again, super supportive audience, but I've watched them just crush very good, very talented comics because they didn't know what they were walking into.
Right. Well, that's really interesting. I'm excited to do it. I'm bringing my husband with me, and
Hell yeah.
that will
I
be
think every comic should have to do a club like that because it's really fun. And two, I think your spouse goes to it because that was the thing that my wife and I were surprised about is like we were like, oh, it's not necessarily we want to go have sex with these people, but it's just a fun like they have a fun vibe. And it's hard to
right.
place what it is, but they're just fun.
Well, I mean, you're there to have a good time, so you got to
It
be
yeah, it kind of reminds you of like those parties in high school and college where you're like, well, what if happens if we all got naked tonight? But they actually did.
right.
And then somebody walks by and you're like, oh, you shouldn't have. You shouldn't
Yeah.
have. But then I'm like, well, who cares? That's the other thing is I'm like, oh, yeah, naked people are cool. I don't have no problem with it anymore. You learn to not care.
All right. Well, speaking of which, you've lost a lot of weight recently.
Yeah.
Like how much? Are we counting?
Let's see. It's 172 as of last count.
Holy
172
shit.
pounds. Yeah. So
Yeah, it was like uh I saw you at World Series of Comedy and I had seen, oh, you've lost weight, but it's just like your most recent pictures. I mean, there's a drastic difference just recently that I've
yeah, it's
no
been since you saw me in February, it was 50 more pounds. So
yeah.
It's been an adventure. So for your audience, yeah, I ended up getting, I had a gastric sleeve. I was at 452 at my heaviest. Um, went through the program. You have to go through basically a 6-month program to get before you can get approved for the surgery. Got the surgery in December, and it's been great. It's not a thing for everyone, but
Mhm.
like I'm like, yeah, I was just at a point where I needed it.
And so you feel okay. So I noticed that I've asked all the women that I've had on the show, and I haven't asked any of the men, and that is my mistake. I realize, but how's your body image?
So much better. Yeah. I feel so much more comfortable with myself and where the spaces I fit. For the first, I think probably the first 70 pounds, there'd be a pretty regular, like, oh shit, this has changed on my body. Like I could tie my shoes without having to like take the shoe off and tie it and put it on and things like that. Fitting in booths in places. My big one was getting on an airplane and not needing a seatbelt extender. And it was just like, oh, there's these things. I got on stage, like the first time I got on stage and wasn't drenched in sweat after a 10-minute set.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, oh, I feel so much more comfortable. Um, and so
And does
as it's
that go through?
progressing,
Does
huh?
that follow through to your sex life?
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. It's amazing. Well, first, you never have to do that thing where you're like, am I crushing this person? Or you're like, oh, I'm so glad I'm having to use this person's butt as a belly rest. That never feels good. Or there was just that point where you're like, ugh, I'm starting to wonder about my wife's standards if she'll still fuck this. So it was that's been very nice. It's been huge as far as like just stamina, endurance, and just like sex is 90% mental. It's, do I feel attractive? Do I feel like I look good?
Mm-hmm.
So that's just gone up. You're not having to do that thing where you're just sweating on somebody's back and just apologizing. Um, it's probably not a familiar experience. I don't, maybe you and your husband Peg. I don't know, but it's just, yeah, you're like, I don't get sweated on, or I don't sweat on people. And that feels nice. That's just a huge ego boost right
Yeah, yeah, I can imagine. Do you have a sexual bucket list, or have you done everything you wanted to do?
there. Oh man. Hey, let's see, where's my wife? Taking notes, I hope. Um, I am always, I mean, it just, there's always something new. Though I have learned, like, I was at the club, and one time I was like, "Oh, I think I asked them about the St. Andrew's cross," and they're like, "Hey, you can go on that." And I got whipped one time, and I was like, "Nope, I'm good. I'm good. That's not a thing for me." Because I was at first I was like, "Oh man, I have a, it sounds fun. I have a submissive personality in the bedroom," and I was like, "Well, maybe I just need somebody dominant." And then that happened. I was like, nope, I don't. I need it.
Yeah.
Is there such a thing as like a cuddle dom that just like tells me I'm a good boy? And I was like, ooh, I don't want that either. There was no winning for myself that night. The last time we were there was a lady very convinced or trying to convince us to do electro play.
Mm,
Yeah, and it was, she had basically a car battery, or at least a very powerful battery, was like doing something to have electricity, and then she would touch you like your arm or your neck, or one of those other erogenous zones, and I'm like, oh, this feels nice. And then she's like, that's supposed to make you come without touching you. And I was like, oh, that's not going to happen, and now I don't want that. I guess maybe I watched Lethal Weapon too much as a little kid. I just always thought of that scene where they're electrocuting Mel Gibson. I was like, I don't want that
yeah.
sexually.
Huh. Well, I know this does make me feel like I'm listening to this, like I am very vanilla, apparently, like I never thought that I was. And part of that is just us settling down as a married person. It's different. But that also makes me wonder, though, like, why is just regular sex not enough? Because to me, it's pretty damn good.
Yeah,
You know,
for a lot of them, it's fetishes. It's it's just this thing that they, and that's the thing. I was like, how do you get into trying that? How do you, like, I was like, electricity play. Where's the start point for that? Did you,
That's exactly kind of what I was thinking. It's like, why do we got to go that far? I don't get it. But
yeah, did you stick a fork in a light socket or a outlet? And we're like, whoa, hold on, that's a thing now. So yeah, I imagine it's probably that thing where it passes, they pick it up from somebody else and it becomes a kink. And
hmm hmm I
and
mean,
I
I'm not trying to be judgmental. I'm just trying
right.
to get it. That's all. Yeah.
Oh, it's 100%. It's like you're trying to wrap your head around it because there's me who is, I'm like, I don't know, man. I just haven't seen enough butts to be like, oh, I'm sick of butts now. I got to go now find the other thing, like mummify me, which is, there's a person that does that where they wrap themselves up in only their mouth and nose so they can breathe, but otherwise they're basically kind of constricted. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, no, that's
That's like a
and
worst
I'm like,
nightmare scenario.
yeah, you writing that like phobia into sexual turn on. And I just, more power to those people that are boldly going. But I'm like, I like what I like. And
I
not
always
going to change it.
I found it frustrating. Maybe it's just the people that I tried to experiment with, but like, like I think of myself as more of a dominant person. And whenever I would try to uh, do those kind of things, I was always with someone who said they were submissive, but their submissiveness was just about doing whatever I asked them to do incorrectly so that I would punish them. And it would be like, no, that's not what I'm after here. Like, I'm after you to be submissive the way I like. So I found that frustrating.
So you had like a brat situation.
Always. Yes.
Huh. Yeah, yeah, that's one I'm just sometimes I'm just like, just tell me what to do. Yeah, and I just I can't, I'm a people pleaser. So that's me being like, just tell me what to do and I'll do that thing and then we're all happy. But there's people that are like, no, it's got to be a whole game and a whole
Yeah.
involved thing. And I'm like, man, were orgasms just not good enough? Like, is there a better version that you're getting by doing this?
Yeah. Well, another thing is like foot fetish. I mean, I do like a little joke about this, but it's like I thought there might be like some uh foot rubs and pedicures involved, but it was always just I'm gonna jack off on your feet. And that was not interesting to me, you know.
Yeah, I always am like, oh, am I supposed to read a book during this? Yeah.
I, I
What do
guess
I
I
get out of
maybe
this? Oh,
yeah,
nothing.
maybe I just picked some duds, you know.
Yeah,
Lovey.
you got to have the proactive fetishist, you know. But I don't know if you can put that in on FetLife. Um,
Oh boy, this conversation has just made me feel old. So
I man, I don't see how it could. You're in the prime right now for that club.
oh yeah, well, am I really? Is there a lot of old people there?
There's, like I said, it blows my mind the wide range, age, race, socioeconomic status. It's the place I can go that I can see a beat up like 79 Ford pickup and a new Tesla in the
Yeah.
same parking lot. And black, white, Asian, you'll just run into such a range, and it's fascinating. It's in some ways really cool because, like, if you ever know anything about the lifestyle, one of the big things is consent, and I love that fact. I had like a
Right.
lady one day. She's like, "Can I take a picture of you on stage?" And I was like, "Yeah, I want you to do that." And but to her,
Mm-hmm.
she's like, "No, I have to make sure I have consent." And I was like, "Oh, that's crazy." But consent is such a huge thing there that actually almost exclusively the women are in control, and it's
Mm-hmm.
really kind of cool to see. Because if a single guy wants to approach a couple, he has to talk to the woman first. There's
Mm-hmm.
no talking to the guy and then the guy pressures his wife or talks to his wife. there's an order to how they do this, almost a very formalized system for kind of engaging in that. And it's just, I remember one of the times just sitting there waiting for a comedian to finish their set, and there was a couple that were getting ready to do full swap, and just having a conversation about what's okay, what's not okay, what are the limits, and I was like, Jesus, I was like, I've been married 10 years, been with my wife, 14. I don't think I've ever had that conversation. I was like, am I shitty at being married that I'm not like, hey, what's the limit on hair pulling? What's the limit on like too much eye contact?
Uh-huh.
I was like, man, dude, is that the conversation we need to have? I guess maybe going back to your question about what's changed, a lot more communication. Just being like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, you can ask for this, or you can, and it doesn't take anything out of it. I think one of the biggest myths that we have is that good sex is spontaneous. And it's like, yeah, that's nice in the movies, but that's because everyone planned in the movies for it to happen that way.
Right.
And so it's better to just be everyone on the same page.
Yeah, that's interesting. And it's like, I think working as a comedian, the environment, like to be a woman at a comedy show, I mean, I'm a 62-year-old woman, but I guess because of my stage person, I get pawed a lot at shows.
Yeah.
Men touch me a lot right in front of my husband. And I don't mind, but I'm just saying, I don't give any of them permission to do that. They just do that to me, so.
Yeah. I don't know if maybe, do you know guys are shitty? Am I telling you a new fact here? Men might be awful.
I think I noticed that before.
Yeah. I think we might be the problem in everything.
Yeah. I think there are a lot of things in this world that would be improved by more women being involved in them.
Yeah. So.
All right. Well, it's been great talking to you. Thank you so much. How can people, like, what's your Instagram so people can find?
Yeah, you can find me on everything from Twitter to TikTok and Instagram at Cavin_egg. That's CAVIN_EGG. You can find me at my website, cavineggleston.com, or on Facebook at Cavin Eggleston.
All right, perfect. Tell Bree I said hi. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for watching, and be sure to like, subscribe, comment, do whatever you can do to help us out.